The Tshwane University of Technology hosted a dialogue on the art of renaming and naming and its critical role in the transformation agenda. Its aim was to contribute to the undoing of past injustices and to foster an inclusive environment on its campuses. Vice-chancellor and principal Professor Tinyiko Maluleke joins me now. Good evening and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. But let's start with why this is so important to talk about and to do something about now, given the many challenges that take up so much air in our country.
Well, you know, the Tshwane University of Technology is an 18-year-old institution. So we are among the youngest institutions in the public higher education system. And for that reason, we have to continue to define ourselves, if only for ourselves. But more importantly, we have to take the transformation debate beyond the theory and the decolonization debate, if you like, beyond the highfalutin theory. We have to think about the onomatics, that is the names we give to spaces and places inside an institution. We have to think about the names we give to our institutions, but also the aesthetics. The look and feel of these institutions is a crucial part of what transformation is all about. And in African culture, we know how important names are in terms of marking not only who we are, but also who we want to be.
Yeah. The second part of your statement, your response answers my next question about what you believe the impact of this is going to be. And I'd like you to expand a little bit more on this idea that the aesthetics, that one surrounds themselves with or finds themselves in, how that impacts, your sense of belonging, your sense of recognition and visibility.
You know, Iman, one of the challenges we face in this country, I want to suggest, is that there is not enough people, or rather, let me say, there are quite a lot of people who do not identify with who we are in terms of what they see and what they feel. And the universities are in many ways a microcosm of that alienation, that sense of alienation, which has to do with the look and feel, but also the names of places. And I think we have to think beyond political figures, and that's part of the problem. That often when we think about renaming, we think only in terms of politics. And for higher institutions of higher learning, we have to look for impact along the lines you're speaking about. Think about this. We are a continent with so many important pieces of wisdom in the phrases, in the proverbs, but also in the men and women who have made a mark in the history of the world. I mean, think about the Nobel laureates that we have on this continent. Think about the science and people, intellectuals and thinkers that we have on this continent. So when we think about naming, we have to think beyond just the South African borders. We have to think also beyond the political figures, because there's a whole lot out there. And that's why we at TUT decided to name this very important building, which is an admin building at the Pretoria campus, to name it Dinokeng. Dinokeng means place of rivers. And of course, Africa is a continent of rivers. Nile, Congo, Zambezi, Limpopo. And you can go on the Orange River. Think of its importance across the Eastern Cape and into the neighboring countries. So that is the thinking behind the name that we gave to this building.
Let's talk then, Prof, about our government and your thoughts about how well or how they haven't addressed the issues of spatial planning to redress infrastructure shortcomings, or whether this is an issue that they have ignored.
Well, I wouldn't say they ignored it completely, because there is a spatial planning. There's a spatial plan there is the National Development Plan. So we do have some plans on our shelves. How well we implement them is, of course, another matter. But what I'm really talking about is not merely the brick and mortar infrastructure. I am talking about the psychological, if you like, the spiritual infrastructure that needs as much to be rebuilt as the physical infrastructure, because a people who are alienated from themselves, a people who are not reconciled to the country in which they live, to the buildings that they walk past every day, to the surroundings. You can build as much infrastructure for them. You can give them as much foreign direct investment. You can give them as much 4IR. But until they can fix the inside, the head space, you know, all of this might not come to much. And that is what we're talking about when we're talking aesthetics of places and onomatics, what we call them, and what they inspire in people.
You know, Prof, as a final question, we have, broached the issue almost tangentially in South Africa about the pathologizing of the violence and the trauma coming out of an apartheid and 100 years of oppression and its impact on people throughout the generations. That seems to be the deeper work that you're talking about there, because some will argue, doing this on campus, practically easier, more cost-saving than trying to create and change the aesthetics of an entire country. How do we go about starting to do that work meaningfully, this re-engraving of people who are dealing with their wounding and really focusing on how we heal after coming out of such a dark chapter?
I like that you refer to wounding, because, the injuring and the wounding is as much physical as it is historical, as much psychological as it is material. In my brief talk when we were renaming this building, I referred to the example of Fela Kuti. Fela Kuti, the late Nigerian singer, musician. He tells the story of how when he was born, he was named by a German missionary and he was called Hildegard. Now imagine if we were to talk about Hildegard Kuti instead of Fela Kuti, and he describes it as a wound. He said, I felt this name like a wound for a number of years until I let go of it. And I think there are many similar things in South Africa that continue to wound us, that we need to think of letting go of. But it has to start institution by institution. It may not be that we must wait for government to make proclamations about these things, because we live in these spaces which are full of pictures that alienate, these places which are full of names that alienate, with histories that we simply want to paper over instead of transforming them for better.
Well, thank you so much for stopping by and sharing with us the outcome of those talks. And as always, you give us a lot to think about. And as a nation, certainly, there is a national conversation to be had around some of the themes we discussed today. Vice-chancellor and Principal Professor Tinyiko Maluleke.